H.M.H.S. Britannic. The sister ship of the ill-fated R.M.S. Titanic sank in the Aegean Sea in 1916. The tragic twin of the Titanic was on her way to pick up wounded soldiers to bring back to Britain. After completing 5 successful voyages, Britannic departed from Southampton for Lumnos on the 12th of November 1916. On the 21st of November, a loud explosion shook the ship. 58 minutes later, Britannic sunk beneath the waves. 30 people lost their lives. To understand the full story of the Britannic, let's go back to the very start. Construction on the Britannic started on the 30th of November 1911, less than a year before the sinking of the R.M.S. Titanic. Titanic and Britannic would never get to meet, as the Titanic sank shortly after the beginning of Britannic's construction. 2 years after the sinking of Titanic, Britannic was launched in Belfast on the same slipway as her other sister ship, the Olympic. World War I had begun a few months before the launch, and the British Admiralty decided to use recently requisitioned passenger liners as troop transports. The first to sail were Cunard's R.M.S. Mauretania and R.M.S. Aquitania, later being converted into a hospital ship. Then, on the 13th of November 1915, Britannic was requisitioned as a hospital ship from her storage location in Belfast. Repainted white with large red crosses and a horizontal green stripe, she was renamed H.M.H.S. for His Majesty's hospital ship, Britannic, and was placed under the command of Captain C.A. Bartlett. When declared fit for service on the 12th of December 1915, after her sea trials, Britannic was then assigned a medical team consisting of 101 nurses, 336 non-commissioned officers, and 52 commissioned officers, as well as a crew of 675, which would include firemen and stokers. On the 23rd of December, she left for her first mission to Mudros in the Aegean Sea to bring back the sick and wounded soldiers. She was joined with several other ships on the same route, such as H.M.H.S. Mauretania, H.M.H.S. Aquitania, and her very own sister ship, H.M.T. Olympic. We can only imagine what a sight it must have been seeing all these liners together at once. At the end of her military service, in June 1916, she returned to Belfast to undergo the necessary modifications for transforming her into a transatlantic passenger liner. The British government paid the White Star Line £75,000 to complete the transformation. The transformation took place for over several months, but was then suddenly interrupted by a recall for the ship to return to military service. The Admiralty had recalled Britannic back into serving as a hospital ship. 2 months later, on the 26th of August 1916, the ship returned to the Mediterranean Sea. After completing 5 successful voyages to the Middle East and back to the United Kingdom transporting the sick and wounded, Britannic departed from Southampton for Lumnos on the 12th of November 1916. Her 6th voyage would be her last. Britannic arrived in Naples on the morning of the 17th of November for her coal and water refuelling stop, completing the first part of her mission. On the 21st of November 1916, a loud explosion shook the ship. The cause, whether it was a torpedo from an enemy submarine or a mine, was not apparent. It was later revealed that the mines were planted in the Kia Channel on the 21st of October 1916 by a German U-boat. Britannic started taking on water fast. Bartlett ordered the watertight doors to be closed, but some failed in doing so, which made her sink faster, unlike Titanic. An SOS signal was immediately sent out and was received by several other ships in the area, but Britannic heard nothing in reply. Unknown to either Bartlett or the ship's wireless operator, the force of the explosion had caused the antenna slung between the ship's masts to snap. This meant that although the ship could still send out transmissions by radio, the ship could no longer receive them. Water was flowing aft into Boiler Room 5. Britannic had reached her flooding limit. The nurses had opened portholes to ventilate the wards against standing orders. As the ship's list increased, water reached this level and began entering aft from the bulkhead between Boiler Rooms 5 and 4. With more than 6 compartments flooded, it was clear that Britannic could not stay afloat. In about 10 minutes, Britannic was roughly in the same condition Titanic had been for an hour after the collision of the iceberg. 15 minutes after the ship was struck, the open portholes on E-deck were underwater. Britannic quickly developed a serious list to starboard due to the weight of water flooding in the starboard side. With the shores of the Greek island Kia to the right, Bartlett gave the order to navigate the ship towards the island in an attempt to beach the vessel. At the same time, the hospital staff prepared to evacuate. Bartlett had given the order to prepare the lifeboats, but he did not allow them to be lowered into the water. Everyone took their most personal belongings before they evacuated. The chaplain of the ship managed to recover his Bible. Major Harold Priestley gathered his detachments from the Royal Army Medical Corps to the back of A deck and inspected the cabins to ensure no one was left behind. Some of the crew members began to fear that the list would become too large and decided to launch the first lifeboat without orders from the captain, able to lose their lives, as when the boat was launched into the water, it was dragged into the propellers. Bartlett had then decided to stop the engines, but before he could do so, the propeller sucked 2 lifeboats into it, mincing them along with the passengers on board. Bartlett was then finally able to stop the propellers before it could suck in a 3rd lifeboat. Realising now that there was no hope in reaching land on time, Bartlett gave the final order and sounded 2 final long blasts of the whistle. The signal: abandon ship. Assistant Commander Dyke walked off the deck and entered the water, swimming to a collapsible lifeboat where they continued to coordinate the rescue operations. Britannic rolled over on her starboard side, and the funnels collapsed one by one as it rapidly sank. By the time the stern was out of the water, the bow had already slammed into the sea floor, causing major structural damage to it, before completely slipping beneath the waves at 9:07, 58 minutes after the explosion. Rescue arrived in less than 2 hours, compared to 3.5 hours for the Titanic. The water was also warmer, so people stranded were able to keep breathing and floating. Everybody was successfully able to abandon Britannic. Everybody could have survived if the first 2 boats waited for the captain's command. To this day, Britannic is still the largest ocean liner that ever sank. Britannic, the 3rd and final of the Olympic class, never got to be a passenger liner due to her sinking during the war, leaving Olympic to continue on her life with no sisters along her side. And that's really it, everyone. That is the story of the life of H.M.H.S. Britannic. I really hope you enjoyed this special video, guys, to commemorate the 102nd anniversary of the sinking of the Britannic. Thank you for watching, everyone, and I'll see you soon.